All right. So the beginning of the Second Republic. A guy named Shigari, SS, that's what I call him, won the presidential election, and he was president during a time of dropping oil prices in 1981. And so there was a recession, and Shigari tried to rig the election to get reelected because he probably wasn't going to get reelected due to the whole recession he didn't get into, but he couldn't get out of. But this rigging the election was stopped by the military, which was led by Muhammadu Buhari. Buhari is very important. So then there was a lot of military rule, led by a guy named Ibrahim Babangida, and Sani Akbara. I'm gonna call these guys Abram and Sani. Maybe that's how you're supposed to pronounce them. They fought the economic crisis by cutting public spending and making the lives of Nigerians pretty miserable. There was a lot of regional and ethnic divides, and also now social-political and social-economical because of making everyone's life so miserable. So there was then a third republic that was brought slightly more peacefully when the military allowed the creation of political parties, and people protested because they were afraid there might be another civil war because of this new republic. But his partner, Sani Akbara, straight up betrayed him because he wanted to keep the military in charge, so he staged a military coup to keep the military in power. He used a lot of violence and killed anyone who disagreed with him. He overthrew the ex-president, and threw him in jail. And this guy named Kensaro Wawaya, who protested the regime, he was executed, and that made major political news, which pissed off a lot of other countries. So this guy, Akbara, died. Oh, he died of a heart attack. And the next leader in 1999 started what was called the Fourth Republic, which is the current republic. So that's about roughly the messy history of Nigeria. We can start getting into the political regime. There have been periods of military rule. There's been authoritarian rule, and about any other rule you can think of, imperialism, colonialism. And every single time there's a new leader or some kind of government, it's failed. And so far the fourth regime has had 5 successful elections. Right now in Nigeria, some of the most important part of elections are media, having an educated voter group, and candidates. So let's talk about the Constitution. So Nigeria is reforming the 1999 Constitution. Yeah, so there was an original British Constitution in 1922, which was rewritten multiple times, trying to handle the changes in ethnicity and the rapid economy. And then in the 1960s, the Constitution founded the bicameral Parliament and gave all of the power to Parliament. And then 1979, the Constitution created an Americanized presidential system. But right now, the 1999 Constitution is what's pretty much being ruled, but changes are being made. So there's 3 branches of government, just like the American government. You've got the executive, who's had lots of rulers in the past. There's been Muhammadu Buhari, who was the military general. He's also a Muslim, which is important considering the ethnic divides. Then he was arrested because of corruption. Before him, there was a man named Goodluck Jonathan, who was Christian. He's very important. In 2015, actually, he stepped down willingly, which was one of the first peaceful transitions in leadership. But before Jonathan, there was Umehu Adua. He was in office. He had good policies and people liked him, unfortunately, because he didn't succeed in those policies. But yeah, he didn't fulfill a lot of those policies. But the way Goodluck Jonathan essentially got his job is Yahada was stepped down due to hate. And Goodluck Jonathan just kind of walked in and took power because there was so much corruption at this point. There wasn't going to be a good election. But unfortunately, he didn't fulfill many promises either, but he was still very much like, he'll come back. So the way that the executive branch works is that presidents nominate their running mate, and they create their council called their Federal Executive Council, and using the federal charter principle, that means that the presidential appointees and the bureaucracy hires people from every state, which helps with some of the bias between a southern leader only hiring southern people, or a northern leader only hiring people from the north. It's kind of affirmative action. So then let's talk about the legislative branch. So it's called the National Assembly, which is the federal legislature. It has two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate, 4-year terms, and people can be reelected. The House is 360 seats, one seat for each district, and the Senate has 109 seats, which is 3 senators from the 36 states. They follow the president, but recently they've been louder in their opinions, which is a step towards a more established democracy. There's a lot of debate to switch to a unicameral Congress, and we're hoping that would end conflict, but that's another part of progressing in democracy, is arguing about democracy. So the judicial branch still respects Sharia law in a lot of cases, but the Supreme Court does have a lot of legitimacy. It has throughout its almost entire history, through military coups, through authoritarian power, even in British colonial times. The judicial branch has always been pretty powerful. Whether or not Sharia law will remain in courts is up for debate right now. So the electoral system is pretty simple. It's a direct democracy. The House and the Senate are elected separately. The president wins by getting 25% of the votes in 2/3 of the state, which means that everybody in the country needs to agree that the president will be the president. If these requirements are not met, then voting is redone, which does leave a little bit of room for corruption. So the biggest party is the People's Democratic Party, the PDP. They created zoning, which said that you must have candidates. The candidates must switch off from the North or the South. So one year someone from the North runs, the next year someone from the South has to win. And this is another example of some of those kind of pseudo-affirmative action, progressive parts of the PDP. And then the second party is the All Progressive Congress, which is really the only strong challenge to the PDP. So the way that it's elected is the House is a single-member district. So the House gets whatever the most votes gets. And then the Senate is winner-take-all as well. So there's always been a decent amount of local government in Nigeria, a little less and a little more depending on what kind of government they're in between. In 1970, Nigeria was split into 12 states, and then in 1979, the 700 local authorities were made, and that was a little bit too much, so in 1983, they cut it down to about 300 local authorities. They have very little power, and very little revenue, and part of the reason that is because if you give some of the regions in the South too much power, they will secede again. That's my prediction, but it would probably be better off. But I'm not here to give my personal opinion. So the country's main export is oil, so that's most of the country's revenue. And if the oil went directly to the places it came from, then the South would have a major disproportionate amount of money than it already has. So they use something called the deviation formula, which divides the revenue among all the states in the country. So there's plenty of political conflict and competition. They do have a party system, mostly the two parties mentioned, the PDP and the All Progressives Congress. And those are some of the most important parts of Nigeria. I don't know if there's going to be a part 3. Probably not. Next video I'm going to make will be the UK. Again, this is not for anybody but me, so if you're watching, you watch the whole thing, then you better subscribe because you're wasting my time.